What, did you think that just because they released a massive 7-hour plus long demo that Atlas was done feeding us information prior to the release of Unicorn Overlord? You fools! How could you have been so blind? My name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and welcome back to the channel.
Unicorn Overlord.
Hello everyone. If you enjoy what I do, my coverage of Unicorn Overlord, strategy RPGs, or the gaming sphere in general, and my stuff's entertaining or informative to you, a like on this video and a subscription to the channel would be very much appreciated. Thank you so much. Also, thank you everyone for helping me get to 15,000 subscribers. This was my end of year goal for 2023, and while we didn't quite get there by the time that I was hoping we would, I'll take a delay by a couple of months to hit such a big milestone. So thank you to everyone who's been supporting the channel, whether you've joined us extremely recently or you've been along for the ride from the very beginning or somewhere in between. It means just so much. This is my dream job, and I can only hope that I'm able to continue growing it with your help and by providing you all with the entertainment and information that you need. So, what's the topic for today? The latest and final episode of Commander's Guidance, where Josef the Paladin is teaching Elaine, and by extension us, about the mechanics of Unicorn Overlord. Finally, we're being shown the combat tutorial, which is kind of funny because, yeah, we did just have a huge demo that we've all been devouring for the last week, and anyone who's been playing the demo, most of you far more than I, because I haven't had the time that I'd like to spend on it as I, would like, have just been crushing it and learning everything that there is possible to learn. However, there are people who would probably appreciate the refresher, or people who haven't played the demo and just would like to know what all this combat stuff is about and how it works. So we're going to go over that, but we're also going to go over a couple of interesting things that, as always, we can pick out of the background footage that they show off in these videos. And that's where the most interesting stuff is. If that's all that you would like to see, there will be a timestamp in the description and in the scrubber bar that you can jump to. But if you want to see everything that there is to see, let's watch on. We start off discussing the various ways that you can deploy your units and move them around the battlefield using valor points, as well as how to actually engage in combat, being able to swap around between units, etc., etc. Basic stuff now, but all very good knowledge to have if you're not super familiar with the game at this point and you happen to be watching this video for one reason or another, whatever that reason may be. In particular, I do love the fact that we do have the swap mechanic where if you have two ally units within range of each other and one of them comes under attack, you can actually choose which unit is going to take the engagement, which is awesome. It's a good way of saving weakened allies. It's a good way of making sure that you have the appropriate matchup for the fight that's coming. It's very handy, and it saves a lot of unnecessary pain and maneuvering as you try to get your units around in real time. The importance of gaining Valor points is discussed, as they're not only used for deploying units, but also for activating various Valor abilities, which in the early game of the demo haven't been the most useful thing, but I imagine as battles get larger, Valor points become more prevalent, and enemies become more dangerous, we'll be utilizing Valor skills more and more. And notably, a lot of the background shots that we see when discussing Valor abilities are not really early game stuff, so that kind of confirms that idea for me. The fact that there's equipment on stages, such as different shrines that can summon magical effects, and this catapult here, which is one of the new things that we have confirmation of, are brought up. We'll talk about that more in a minute. And then the dangers of units being defeated in combat, of being forced into a wait state, of potentially being overwhelmed, etc., etc. Notably, something that is called out in the trailer is the fact it's not necessarily the HP that is lost that dictates which squad loses a given conflict, but the percentage of HP, which is an important difference. Otherwise, things like gladiators that have massive amounts of HP would naturally come out on top more often than not. Here, it's a bit more of a matter of, okay, who dealt the most damage percentile-wise compared to one another, there's your winner. And that's something that I had theorized about and kind of been seeing in the course of my playtesting, but it's good to have outright confirmation of it here in the trailer. It's also brought up that if you lose an engagement, either by the timer running out or running out of all your squads or your main base being captured, you can use Hallowed Corn Ash to reverse that loss. I've not actually had this happen yet, so I haven't had to use a Hallowed Corn Ash to see how exactly it resets, but it either would let you reload from a certain point in the battle, I'm assuming, or maybe repel an enemy, revive your units. It's hard to say. Ideally, though, in my opinion, you don't want to be using your Hallowed Corn Ash this way. Obviously, this is a desperation play. What you really want them for is a way to regain Valor points at a moment's notice. So you can activate important abilities, deploy more squads as needed, etc., etc. I feel like that's going to be the preferential use for them in most scenarios. We'll have to see how the game develops outside of the course of the demo, but that's what it's feeling like at the moment. Next up, we talk about battle and how things flow, utilizing AP and PP, how a fight will only end once all allies and enemies run out of AP or one side or the other is defeated, etc., etc. We do get some cool shots of some new abilities. We'll talk about that in the second half of the video as well. Finally, we talk about the tactics system, my current nemesis that I really am fighting to grapple with at the moment. Well, given the comments on my previous couple of videos, it seems like there is still a lot of discussion in general of how to not to only optimize things, but how the system itself might read. There's some questions about that we're going to be testing out. But the general gist is that you want to make sure that each of your abilities has appropriate targeting and conditions attached to them, so you can guarantee that your units are going to be doing what you want them to when you need them to do it. This is going to be a very complex system to fully get the understanding of, but as we continue to learn about it and how to best utilize it, it will get more and more satisfying to use. It is noted as well that you can set your equipment and tactics automatically, something that I've discussed in the pre-release material, which is huge, because if you are not like me and don't feel like bashing your head against the wall of figuring out how to perfectly optimize your tactics, even if it's something that is particularly difficult for you, then you can just set up a set of auto tactics, and I imagine you should be able to get through without too much issue. It might become a problem on Expert, but at the same time, when a difficulty mode is called Expert, it makes sense that they would kind of want you to have a core system like that under your belt and mastered before you try and take the mode on. Now, that's the general gist of what this episode of Commander's Guidance is talking about, but as I mentioned, there are some cool things that I want to address here now. First off, we have a shot here of the effect of the Valor skill Blade Wave, damaging all enemy units within range with a potency of 150 and 1.5 times the damage if the target leader can use assists. This is particularly interesting because this just means that the ability is going to devastate any squad led by an archer, a mage, or a cleric of some kind as the three main assist type classes that we've seen, which is particularly brutal. Like, those are already some delicate classes, so to be hit by something with a physical potency of 150 when even basic attacks typically have around 100 is a lot of damage, let alone if you get another increase on that if they can use one of those assists. It affects a large area, and the screenshot here seems to imply that there's going to be times where there's going to be large waves of enemies coming at us. That may be too much for a normal group of squads to handle, and that's where you're going to want these Valor skills to kick in. We can also see in the left side of the screenshot that catapult that we mentioned earlier. Don't worry, we'll get to that in a moment. Here we can see the squad with Berengaria, one of my particular favorite designs in the game, and who we now know is the older sister of Travis the Thief, who you can actually see in her squad. She is this dark-haired woman with the spiky shield on the left-hand side. I'm really curious as to what her actual role in the story will be, what her class is, but this is good to know that she is 100% going to be playable, and presumably not that much further into the game from what we've seen in the demo. People have been hitting like level 14, maybe 15 in the demo play, and all of these characters are level 16. So realistically, she shouldn't take that long to unlock, depending on where you go in the world, of course, once you beat the first section and get past the demo. Also, we can see how truly massive this particular map that we're on is, with multiple enemy strongholds, multiple catapults, multiple bonfires, a lot to carve through to get to the end, which makes me super excited. I cannot wait to see how complex some of these battles get and how long some of them take to beat, especially with the timer. That's going to be very, very interesting to see. In this shot here, we have some more insight into some of the interesting classes that we're going to be able to utilize, even if they are small ones. In Clive's unit, we actually have a giant hammer and great shield wielding bear, which is awesome. We've seen a few different shots of bestial units here and there. The werewolves were brought up early on in the pre-release material, which we can also see a werewolf in the shot here. But these hammer bears, like, move over, hoplites. Hodrick, who is he? Give me a hammer bear to hold my front line. Hell yeah, absolutely. We can see a lot of other names here, a lot of different types of units. I'm not even going to bother going through all of them at this point because you know we're getting pretty close to the release and we're going to learn who they are as we go. But there's a Wyvern Knight. There's what seem to be promoted Griffin Knights, a promoted cleric, a number of different things. So given the fact that these are all level 30 units, we can imagine this is pretty far into the game, and you've had plenty of opportunities to size up your squads and promote your units. In this screenshot here, we have an example of the snowy environment that we've seen around a couple of times, with an interesting map design that is actually fairly narrow, but quite tall. But most notably, we can see this tiny little blue circle in the top right, implying that our home base is in the dead center of the map. So you know we're going to be fending off attacks from all sides. Now, the question is this a defense map? Or is this a map where we still have an enemy stronghold that we have to get to defeat a leader while also fending off attacks from all sides? I'm so excited to see how some of these battles play out. Like, I know we were just talking about, like, so excited to see how long they take and how complex they get, but the idea that we could actually have different objectives like this, wherein, like, it's not even necessarily an objective of, like, well, hold the base, but just when your base is in the dead center of the map, and you have to hold it lest you lose, that's going to change everything about anything that you could be trying to do. So how exactly it's going to shake out, of course, we don't know, but this is an awesome screenshot to see. I cannot wait to figure out exactly how surviving these types of fights is going to go. Here we have a much more simple looking map in the Elven lands, I believe it would be, based on the terrain, with level 18 units, a promoted Elaine, and what appears to be at least one of the elf sisters who we've seen in the pre-release material here. It's a much simpler map, however, it does look like the enemies are pretty scary. There's definitely promoted units in here, so even though it is a simpler layout, I don't think that means that it'll be any less challenging, so that's going to be interesting to see in action as well. Here we get some of our first shots of the deserty area that we've seen a couple of times, but not too commonly. And this, throughout this little clip here, you can see is a much larger, much widely open, not quite so densely packed map compared to some of the things that we've seen before. And that's going to be very interesting because maneuvering could wind up becoming very important. If enemies try to move around the outside edge to sneak up on your base, that type of thing, or if maybe the sand inhibits movement and you have to be careful about leaving the beaten path lest your units get stuck or severely slowed down, that could be very interesting as well. So how these different climates are going to play into the way our units move around and how we're able to engage in combat remains to be seen, but I'm very excited about it. Finally, in this little clip here, we can see a squad of Zenoiran Dark Knights, which, hell yeah, that's a class I love to see. A bunch of axe-wielding cavalry. Ooh, I know it's a possibility that it's an enemy-only class, but I really hope it's not, because it's exactly my jam. This is on the same map where we saw the Blade Wave Valor ability being used before, but most importantly now, we can see the catapult in play. Now, we do know that to utilize any sort of siege weaponry or equipment or shrines that summon magic effects like that, you need to station a squad with it and move them around. But before, we really only saw either stationary shrines that summoned a temporary magical effect, or a battering ram that was really only useful for breaking through barricades and busting down doors. But now, we've seen the catapult at play, and you can see it will be devastatingly powerful. How common these are going to be is another question entirely. It's possible that they're only present in this area of the map in this country. It would be a little bit of a shame if that was the case, but it could also be cool to have sort of map-specific or area-specific different map objectives. So we'll have to see, but I'm excited to find out how useful these are, and more importantly, if the enemy's going to use them on us as well. There's been a number of times where I've been caught off guard by enemies using Valor abilities that I wasn't expecting, so I would not be surprised if they suddenly decided to turn the siege weaponry on us. And I mean, really, fair is fair, right? Then it just becomes a matter of figuring out how to deal with it. The other interesting thing to note here is that unlike with Valor abilities where the map kind of freezes, your effect goes off, and whatever you're going to hit gets hit, as the catapult has been fired, two things happen. First of all, the squad manning it goes into a wait state, so they now cannot move and they cannot fire. And secondly, time does not stop. The Zenoiran Dark Knights are continuing to ride through the valley as the rocks come crashing down atop them, which means you're going to have to actually time your shots. You're going to have to figure out how quickly they'll land and how fast the enemy is moving to make sure you don't actually miss, which is so cool. Like, the fact that you actually might be able to try to outmaneuver siege weaponry if the enemy uses it on you is so sick. It's not just a static effect where it's like, well, it's like Fire Emblem Ballistas. They have 5 shots. Time to just park a dodgy unit in range and let them dodge all the attacks until they're out of ammo, because otherwise there's just nothing I can do about it. No, here, if you can actually try to get out of the way, that's interesting. I really, really like that. I hope that there's going to be a lot of other siege weaponry involved as well. We'll have to see, but fingers crossed. Next, we move to a shot of a promoted wizard of some kind. We don't have an actual class title here, but we can see two interesting new abilities in play. First of all, there's the Volcano spell, which uses 2 AP to activate, and unfortunately, we don't actually know how much damage it does because it's blocked by this Royal Knight's shield. However, we do see the Concentrate ability in play, which costs 2 PP and gives the promoted wizard, maybe mage, archwizard, something like that, both accuracy up and AP up, which is interesting. It only gives 1 AP, but still, pop a big spell that costs 2, use Concentrate, get 1 AP back, use Fireball. That's a lot of damage output, and if you got your accuracy up as well, you're much more likely to hit. Seems pretty good. I really do think that throughout the entire game, wizards and their promotions and their equivalent classes are going to be very, very, very highly damaging and dangerous units. And that is everything that I've been able to glean from this episode of Commander's Guidance. I certainly hope that you enjoyed it. I enjoyed being able to put it together. I was quite pleased to see that it finally dropped when I was at work today, and I was excited to get home and put this video together for y'all. I'm going to be trying to put together another video for tonight. We'll see if it actually happens. I've got a couple scripts that are nearly complete, as well as a number of unscripted videos that I want to go through talking about characters, systems, all that type of stuff. But, you know, between working essentially full-time at my job and then working more than full-time on YouTube, I've been getting a little bit worn out. So thank you for bearing with me. I'm very excited to continue covering Unicorn Overlord, and I'm thinking of maybe doing like a live stream boot camp, like a tactics boot camp, wherein we're just in there in a nearly complete, like maybe 30 minutes remaining, I've recruited as many characters as possible demo run, so we can just sit there in the mock battle system and just try different squads, try different tactics loadouts, so I can finally grasp what the heck I'm doing, and anyone else who's confused or trying to learn and trying to get their head around things can learn with me, and we can all try out builds together. I think that could be a lot of fun, so look for that coming up in the near future. I definitely think that's something that I want to do. But with all that said, thank you all again for 15K. My name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there. And remember, be good to each other. Bye now.